Okay, moving on. We had several questions measuring and understanding how Coloradans think education is funded. One was an open-ended. Please describe how you think public education is funded in Colorado. And we asked this question without posing options, like you tell us how you think it's funded. And for the most part, people do understand that it is through taxes. Some understand perhaps it's more property tax, but we were also very curious to see, either to distill the myth or not, that so many people believe marijuana taxes are significant and they should be flowing to every school district. Therefore, why are you asking me for a property tax increase? Marijuana should be taking care of everything. And we wanted to see if that really was in there. And, really what we found is that, references to marijuana taxes funding schools wasn't overwhelming. It was less than 10% of the responses. There was some smatterings of it in there, but it is not at all overwhelming. Erica, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, there was another question that asked, like, can you pay teacher salaries out of marijuana sales tax? And there was not a majority, but there was a larger share of people that thought the answer to that was yes. And so I think there is still some room for education of voters on that issue, but it was not as high as I think maybe the conventional wisdom is, that everyone thinks that schools are just because I see these comments on social media. People post them on our page. Why should I vote for this? Because schools have all this pot tax money. But I don't think that's actually as widely believed as maybe a lot of us thought.
Definitely. And it doesn't hurt for a school district, perhaps, if they are in the middle of a ballot measure, to mention, hey, just so you know, we get very little funding from marijuana, and of making that clear. But it's definitely not perhaps as high as we thought it was going to be. Other general questions. Do you think school districts in Colorado have the financial resources needed to provide students with a good education? 43% said yes, 49% said no. But what I think Erica and I found really interesting was among parents, the folks that are most familiar with their school district, a majority said yes, they do have enough funding to provide a good job. They obviously are closer to it more than anywhere. Non-parents, that's 65%, and that's either young adults or it's empty nesters. A majority felt that no, they don't. So we found that as really one very interesting observation. And Erica, you want to follow on that?
Yeah, that surprised me. I don't know that I have a lot of insight into why that is. Maybe for those of you running schools, you're doing a good job kind of filling in those gaps so that they're not as visible to parents. So good job. Yeah, obviously we see the partisan divide here. I don't think that's super surprising. But I guess that, if you're if you're trying to make a case around money for your community, just to keep in mind sort of how you're communicating that and who you're communicating to.
Yeah. Next question. Do you think additional funding for public education will result in a better education? A majority said yes on this question. If you really want to see, look at the partisan affiliation responses. Democratic folks, 85% overwhelmingly believe that this is true, where Republicans, a strong majority at 60%, do not. And then a slight majority of unaffiliates. I think that's very interesting and also not very surprising, as we have an ongoing, constant discussion in our state, regarding will more money lead to a better education? And a majority do believe that. But it's very interesting to see how that breaks out among these population subgroups.
No, I think you spoke to it.
Okay.
I think that's
sure. Okay. This section we checked out and measured opinions around certain policies, if you will. And one of those, to start off, among the following challenges facing public schools in Colorado, please choose up to 3 that you think school districts should be addressing the most. These are the options that we provided. Top 3, attracting and retaining high quality teachers, preparing students for the workforce. That's the number one issue. We see that a lot also in some of our higher education polling, and increasing teacher pay. Student mental health coming in 4th there, if you will. Preparing students for college, addressing student learning loss from COVID. Erica, do you want to speak to that or any of these others?
Yeah, I thought this was interesting, partly for the divide in what the general public thinks is most important versus maybe where a lot of the policy discussion is happening. So on the one hand, I think teacher pay and teacher retention have been very much in the news. I think we've heard a lot about staffing shortages. District leaders have certainly made it really clear that that was just a huge challenge this past school year. And so I think that's gotten through, and we see that rated really highly. I think it's interesting that preparing students for the workforce rates higher than preparing students for college. I think there's a broader understanding. I think there's concern that students are coming out of high school unprepared. And I think some of the debate around student debt has I think raised questions about should everyone go to college, but people do want to make sure that kids are coming out of school prepared, regardless of which path they take. And then I thought it was interesting that learning loss rated lower. And then some of the issues that are giving our schools a lot of headaches, like declining enrollment and how does that affect your financial bottom line, is not really registering with the public. So this poll was taken before the Uvalde shooting, but we see that safety of school buildings did not rate very high as a concern.
Right, and it would have likely been higher had it been during Uvalde. So interesting measurements. And again, if you're looking for particular subgroups, because this is overall responses. But right now, that's what they think school districts should be addressing the most. Okay, another policy that was talked about a lot in the legislature. Some people believe that the learning loss among Colorado students due to remote learning and COVID justify giving tax dollars directly to parents to pay for tutoring, tuition at another school, or other educational needs. Do you agree or disagree with this viewpoint? Strong majority of 60% do not agree with this viewpoint or disagree, excuse me. And only about a third of respondents felt that this is where they wanted to go. In all of our years polling, in all honesty, folks, whether it's around school choice, charter schools, or here in Colorado, this is pretty consistent from what we see. Voters, anytime you start talking about rediverting dollars like this in a very broad description, it's pretty much a majority always oppose it. They're uncomfortable with it, as you can see, including a majority of Republicans. So I just would say that this policy is really not well embraced and at all. Erica, do you want to follow up?
Yeah. So I think, this is consistent with sort of a general lack of interest in vouchers that we see in Colorado that probably is related to the strong public school choice system that we have in part. And I was curious if the disrupted learning during the pandemic would change that calculation. There were various bills that were run in the legislature. This was part of the Republican commitment to Colorado to give parents, put money in the pocket of parents so that they can address some of these learning needs. So I was curious if this was going to change due to the circumstances. And I was surprised to see sort of how consistent the opposition was across demographics. And Sure. This may also relate to to learning loss not being rated very highly as an issue, that maybe that's not resonating with people. And so there's not maybe the urgency that they would feel if they thought that learning loss was the top issue.
Definitely. And I would agree with that. I think this reinforces the impression that it's just not being discussed or reported on enough, if you will, or people are not aware of how do we address students and learning loss.